Hello again, fellow gamers. I am 1VideoGameDude, welcoming you back to the channel. I have a very important question for y'all that I'll get to by the end of the video. But first, join me as we travel back to 1989, the year the Game Boy debuted in the United States. Also, please consider subbing so that you can get alerted of new episodes of our Game Boy Years series, where we take a look at Game Boy and pop culture throughout its years. Without further ado, let's jump into this random DeLorean right quick and push all the red buttons. Great Scott! We've woken up on Monday, July 31st, 1989, the day that the Nintendo Game Boy is released in the United States. Let's picture this for a moment here. You're at your local Pizza Hut with the family having dinner before a movie. It's a Monday right after school and you just spent the day talking to friends about video games and playing with some Masters of the Universe action figures. The movie that your parents are taking you to see is Tim Burton's Batman, starring Jack Nicholson as Joker and Michael Keaton as the winged crusader himself. Batman is the summer hit and you've excitedly been waiting to see it. You had already thought you saw the best movie ever earlier that year, which was Back to the Future Part 2. Let me know in the comments what movie you'd be excited to see if you were living in 1989. As you finish your second slice of pepperoni pizza, your dad announces to you that thanks to all that overtime he put in at the old steel mill, he wants to surprise you with an early B-Day gift. Game Boy! Can I have a Game Boy? You exclaim. Your mom turns to dad and says, that sounds like another Nintendo. It's a Nintendo, isn't it? You exclaim, it's an NES that you can take with you. It's okay, kiddo, calm down, dad says. I get paid on Friday, so I'll take you after school to Toys R Us and pick up this, what's it called again? Game Boy? You and your parents after having a nice meal at Pizza Hut. Speaking of which, who misses the Pizza Hut of the olden days? Check out how Pizza Hut looked in 1989 and let me know which one looks better, the one you go to nowadays or the one back then. You guys eventually do make it to the late showing of Batman. Way too much excitement for one day. Yes, Batman, we do indeed want to get nuts. You're extremely excited for Friday, knowing that you're gonna be able to play the brand new Nintendo Game Boy over the weekend. Up until that very moment, you had only read about it in the latest issue of Nintendo Power a million times. Excited about this small section in one of the articles. See, Nintendo Power in the late 80s was distributed only 6 times a year. So if we take a look at this May-June 1989 issue of Nintendo Power, you'll notice that surprisingly, the Game Boy was only given a small section. The Game Boy is coming out late summer, reads the article. Nowadays, it's easy to just Google a console's launch date, but back then, launch dates were shared via word of mouth with friends or talking to store employees. But let's get back to our visit to 1989. When you get back home from watching your now new favorite movie of all time, you kick off your shoes, the shoes with the cool basketball-shaped pumps on them, jump into bed and knock out, still anticipating what that cool Game Boy is gonna be like to play. That week takes forever to go by, as every day at school, you and your friends obsess over video games and Batman. The Game Boy is gonna be so rad, exclaims your best friend. Friday morning finally arrives as your radio alarm clock wakes you up to the tunes of Skid Row's 18 in Life. Or maybe you were into other kinds of music like Technotronic's Pump Up the Jam. Let me know what kind of music you guys would be listening to. It's literally the longest day ever in your life, but the time finally arrives. Your dad picks you up and before you know it, you're running inside Toys R Us towards the electronics section. Now let's take a break here really quick to talk about what electronics sections looked like back in the 80s. Electronics sections in stores had walls of video games, and depending on the store you went to, some would have cards with the picture of the game and you take the card to the cashier to get the game. Nintendo was known for having some of the most fun and coolest displays of their products. Before digital demos, display cases, and kiosks gave buyers the chance to try out Nintendo games, these kiosks were something else though. Check out this instructional video that stores would receive along with Nintendo displays back in the day.
Game Boy displays. First, we've got the Game Boy Counter interactive display. Here you've got your cool Game Boy with amplified stereo sound.
The amount of effort that went into their advertising is off the charts. One could argue that it is 10 times better than the advertising we get these days. Needless to say, walking into an electronics section back in 1989 must have been quite the memorable experience. As you rush around the aisles, you see it. The Game Boy display. It's like staring into the future, a glorious and breathtaking moment indeed. Your dad goes to the cashier and asks the big question, How much for that? Pointing to the Game Boy display you're drooling over. $89.99, the cashier says. Your dad looks at the cashier and stays quiet for a moment. $89.99, that's approximately 223 buckaroos in 2023. Now for the sake of the story, we're going to assume your dad ponied up the cashola, but let me know in the comments, would your parents had been cool spending 90 bucks back in 1989 for a Game Boy, or if you weren't born back then, would your parents today buy you a Game Boy for $223? The cashier lets your dad know it comes with the game though. Your dad responds, hey, that's good, but you need to buy batteries. Your dad says, oh. Cashier responds, we sell a battery pack and adapter for it, which costs $29.99, and a carrying case that costs 10 bucks. I'll just get a 4-pack of AA's, I'm sure it'll be fine. Your dad says. So 4 AA batteries lasted about 15 hours, give or take. And that is pretty good. I mean, we gotta consider that it didn't have a backlight. Either way, the adapter definitely would have been the way to go, and it would have paid for itself sooner rather than later. You get back home happy as can be with your brand spanking new Nintendo Game Boy. You start to unbox this beautiful new piece of electronic here. The video we're looking at is actually from the YouTuber Nintendo Collector. I'll leave a link to his video in case you guys want to check it out. And you're surprised to notice that it indeed does include 4 batteries. Some of the advertisements back then did not mention that. They said batteries not included. As time went on, Nintendo also came out with a different version of it that had the 4 AA batteries and the Game Boy, but that was it. There was no link cable or Tetris game pack. And of course, we need to mention that Tetris was a lesser known game back in the day. Nintendo really helped to skyrocket the popularity of Tetris, but that was just the beginning, of course. In the next Nintendo Power issue, we get a dedicated page to the Game Boy. There is one standout title that will go on to be one of the funnest 2D Marios in history that's mentioned in this article, and it's none other than Super Mario Land, but that will have to wait until the following year. It was a glorious day indeed, maybe the best day of your life up until then, and that's a memory one surely could never forget. Well, fellow gamers, it's time to come back to 2023, but the important message I wanted to share with you guys is thank you for watching, and I hope you sub to keep tabs as we continue this series, and next time around travel back to 1990 as we continue the Game Boy Years series here on the channel. I also wanted to ask you what you guys would like to see covered going forward. Let me know in the comments what Game Boy games you'd like me to cover on the next video, and keep in touch on social media via X and Facebook at 1VideoGameDude as we're trying to make a return to giveaways for our loyal fans. So stay tuned and remember to stay safe, stay awesome, you're cool.